How's it going, everybody? So this is going to be the last video of the Mustang Bullitt build. So definitely stay to the end, check this one out. Once we get all the brakes done, we got to put on the parking brake cables. We got to bleed the system, and then we're going to put it on the ground and do a complete walk around on this car with the new wheels and tires on it. So it turned out really nice. So definitely check that out. Also be on the lookout for some other videos coming up. That Mercury Zephyr, we're going to end up doing one of our 306 engine builds on that one. I've already got the block completely tore apart, got all the parts laying right there. I'm waiting on some parts to come in so we can get that to the machine shop, start getting the race prep work done on that block. This here, I want to do a video on this one. This is a Challenger Scat Pack. It has a Bischoff Racing engines in it with a Whipple. So we're going to actually be removing the heads on this thing, sending them out and getting them CNC ported. Going to do some upgrade on the valve train. And so definitely stay tuned for that one. So for now, let's not waste any more time and let's get to this video. Well, we've got the front brakes done. This is the passenger side. I've got it all on there. Just have to bleed them out. I've already kind of did a little gravity bleed on it. Man, they look sweet. Once we get this on the road and actually seat these brake pads in, it's obviously going to take this black coating off of the rotors exactly where the pad rides. So, but man, it's going to look sweet. I would say all the slotted and the inside the holes are going to stay black from the coating. So yeah, that's going to look really sweet. So we went ahead and just threw one of the wheels on this side just to see what it looks like. The video really doesn't do it justice, but man, it looks really good. The color of those wheels just offset this green color on this car really nice. Can't wait to get it on the ground. I went ahead and started taking this side apart for the back brakes. I was going to kind of show you guys what has to be done on this side. We haven't started it. So these require the axles to be pulled. So the first thing that you want to do is want to unhook the ABS sensor, because this whole bracket has to come off. So I just popped it out of the back, pop that off of there, and just kind of let it hang. I'm going to go ahead and take this plastic clip off because this whole bracket's going to we're not going to use this whole bracket, so there won't be any way for this to actually clip on. We'll have to zip tie this back on. So before I go pulling this bracket off, I want to loosen this line up, and then I'm going to take the bracket off quick and then plug that line up. All right, let's get this line broke loose. I'll break it loose before you take it off. Take the bracket off. All right, so before this starts dripping and losing fluid, I got a real small rubber plug. I'm going to force it over the end here and keep it from leaking. That way I don't lose any fluid. I'm gonna go ahead and take this this plastic clip off, since it's just going to be in the way when we get the other bracket on. So now we have to, we'll take the parking brake cable off. There's a clip right there. Pop that off. And remove the cable. So now we're going to take the caliper off, and I'm going to remove it with the whole bracket. Since we're not going to use it, we're just going to pull the whole thing off. There's actually one bolt right here. And then there's another bolt right there. So I'm going to pull that whole assembly off of there. Get it out of the way. Get this rotor off. All right, now that we got all this stuff out of the way, we can get this axle out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this dust shield off. Alright, so I went ahead and got the axle pulled out. This dust shield, I could have just left it on because this whole piece has to come off. But I want to go ahead and get it off of there so I can actually see, you know, getting this whole assembly off of here. Okay, they're going to have these nuts on the back. And we have to save those because we have to reuse them. Actually put the bracket on for these brakes. So there's the whole bracket assembly that bolts to this rear end. We've got to take this off too. So I've got the stock bracket assembly off that holds the factory brakes on and the caliper and everything. Obviously you got to take the axle out in order to get all that stuff off. I went ahead and notched this area out for the wheel speed sensor because this is the bracket that gets bolted on there. And the wheel speed sensor actually will come right through that hole right there. And that's why you got to notch that out for it to fit. Have to bolt it onto this bracket. You can see the hole there, and the other hole is threaded. So in order to get this whole assembly on, I've got to take these brake shoes off because the bottom ones aren't too bad, but the top ones are completely covered with the spring. So I'm going to go ahead and get these shoes off of here so I can get it bolted up. So I got the brakes off. Actually, like I said, I had to take the brake shoes off to get these bolts in. And I couldn't even get these in because these bolts have a big flathead on them as far as like a washer on there. So went ahead and took them off. I went ahead and bolted the wheel speed sensor on from the back side. Used the factory bolt for that. Used the factory bolts that actually held the factory bracket on for the original brakes. Use the factory nuts and bolts. These nuts got the tab that comes out on them that kind of keeps them from spinning, so that's pretty nice. You don't have to use a wrench to hold them. So I ran them down, went ahead and torqued them, and this piece actually stayed in because of this bracket was bolted on. I didn't have to take that bracket off. So what I ended up doing to get these shoes off is I unbolted. There was 2 bolts on the back side of this that actually held the shoes, or I should say the parking brake, on. Let me show you. It was just a lot easier than fighting with these shoes because they actually go on just like this, and that is the part that sticks through the back. It kind of sticks right through there, and these 2 bolt holes here are what bolt in to the parking brake bracket. So yeah, I could have got these shoes off without taking it off this way, but as you know, the top spring actually attaches in the back, and a lot of times what you can do with those kind is you take this adjuster out. That gives you the, or you can just take the spring out, then you can take the adjuster out, and then you can swing these in and pretty much remove them with these springs attached. But sometimes it gets to be kind of a pain, so I just did it the easy way. I just took these bolts out, no big deal. So that way I can just put it right back on, run these bolts back in, and they have Loctite on them, so I want to clean the threads up before I run them back in. This spacer actually goes in between the parking brake cable bracket and the backing plate. It goes right in there. So we have to make sure we put that back in before we put that long bolt back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean these threads up. That way they go in easier. I don't want to have no problems with damaging the threads. So I'm gonna clean them up, put fresh Loctite on, put them on. Okay, so I've got the backing plate on the other side. I went ahead and put the axles in. I've got the cover on. I got everything all cleaned up, got the old sealer off the cover. Brake cleaned it up real good, and I put some sealer on it and basically put the cover on and hand tightened it. You generally want to hand tighten it let it sit up for about 30 minutes or so. It kind of starts skinning up a little bit, as they call it, and then you can actually torque it down. These don't really torque down too much anyway, probably about 20 foot-pounds, 25 foot-pounds. So on the other side, I found out something a little bit easier, putting these plates on. So on this one, I did remove the 2 bolts on the top that held the parking brake bracket assembly on the top. And I ended up, taking the shoes completely off. Well, they were a little bit of a pain putting back on with these springs that hold them on. They're so short, they're not long enough. So what I ended up doing on the other side is I still took these 2 bolts off the top, but I left the shoes on the backing plate. With those 2 bolts out of there, I was able to leave the shoes on the backing plate and slide the shoes up far enough to get the bolts underneath the spring that goes across the back here that holds this, the return spring that holds the shoes on. The spring still got in the way a little bit, but I was able to slide the whole assembly, the shoes up far enough to get the bolt in. And then of course I was able to slide them down to get the bottom bolts in. They went in no problem because the adjuster is kind of in the way, but not very much. So that was a lot easier. And then once I did that, I put the 2 bolts back in the top. I cleaned the threads up, put Loctite back on them, torqued them down, and I was good to go. I didn't have to fight with getting the shoes back on this backing plate. So you guys, you know, obviously if anybody that decides to do this, that would be the best thing to do. That way you don't have to take the shoes off. I mean, it was a lot easier doing that. I got to put the rotor on, then I got to put the caliper on, and it says to add 1 shim on each side so the caliper is centered with the rotor. So just like I did on the front, that's the starting point. And we'll see how many shims I got to put on there, if any. Okay, so before we put the rotor on, the kit actually comes with a ring, I guess you could call it a centric ring or whatever. And it basically fills the gap between the axle hub here and the inside of the rotor. And you can see it's got a smaller lip, and the smaller lip goes on the outside. So you put this on first, and then you get the rotor, and that ring, see, this is actually beveled in here, and that ring sits in there. And this rotor, these are these have a lot of different holes in them for different applications. So you just have to turn it till you get the ones that you need. And then you can see it slides on all the way. I've already checked it to make sure the back of it is fitting flush against the axle. And the spacer is fitting flush out here, so your wheel won't get in the way of that. So pretty cool. It fits on there nice. So now I'm just going to go ahead and put me a couple of lug nuts on so this thing fits flush like I did on the front. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide the caliper on and see which shims I have to put on it. So they were just like the front. They're just washers, but they're 35 thousandths each, and they basically want you to put 1 shim between the back side of the bracket and the caliper is what they want to do. So we'll go ahead and get that set up, and let's see how it works out. Okay, so we're making progress. I've got both rotors on. I got the calipers on. I got them shimmed to make them centered with the rotor. So let me show you. It's basically just like the front ones. That's why I went ahead and put the rotor on, and I've got just a temporary lug nut on there, and I just put a big bolt so I wouldn't run out of thread. Make sure that the rotor is on all the way. You've got that metal ring right there that has to be on. That goes on the actual axle first, like I was talking about earlier. So let me see if we can get a look here. They call them shims, but they're washers is basically what they are. They go in between the caliper and the bracket. And you want to make sure that the caliper is even with the rotor. So that rotor is going to be in the center between these two sides here. And it came with 8 shims per caliper. And it took all 8 of them. There's actually 4 shims there, and there's 4 shims on the top bolt up here. So it took all 8 of them, but it's dead center to the rotor. And then this one's the same way. So I've got, like I see, I got this one on same way. I went ahead and torqued the diff cover bolts after the silicone kind of set up a little bit. I went ahead and got the panhard bar back on, and I loaded the suspension. Anytime you work with stock rubber bushings, these bushings are pressed in, just like the lower control arm, they're pressed in. So before you tighten these up, I didn't have to loosen these, I'm just giving you a reference. Before you tighten them up, you want to load the suspension to ride height. So you either do it by being on the ground. In my case, I was able to put a screw jack on this side and one on this side, and I lifted even. Of course, you got to be real careful. You don't want to lift this thing off the rack, but I was able to bring it up just enough right before it started lifting off the rack back here to load the suspension. And then once it was loaded, I went ahead and torqued down this bolt and this one, because I had this one loose and I took the other one out. So that's all good to go. And I also noticed, I didn't pay attention earlier, when I put the rotor on to shim this caliper, I had the rotor on the wrong side. These are directional. This is the right, the other one's the left. And this one I put it on, not even paying attention. Well, when I went to do the other one, I noticed, I said, oh, wait a minute, I got the wrong rotor. So I had to take this caliper back off and put the rotor on, the right side on. And then I went ahead and put that one on. So anytime you do these, drilled and slotted, you want to make sure, because they are directional for sure. So the next thing to do is the parking brake cables. I've already got all this unhooked. There's a bracket right here that it attaches to. Just spread that open a little bit, drop it down. It goes up, and there's a bracket right there. I want to go ahead, it's a 10 millimeter. I want to go ahead and drop that bracket down. It swings over here. Get this up here so you can see it. I've already got them taken off of the front parking brake cable that goes up to the handle. I'm just going to pop these cables out of that bracket. This cable, it doesn't have a second bracket holding it. I've already got it taken loose off of that one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get these cables off of there, and then I'm going to run the new cables on. I got them over here. These are the ones that they don't come in the kit. You have to buy these separate. These are, you have to have them, but they don't come in the kit, which is really weird because you can't use the stock cables. You would think that when you buy these rear brakes, they would automatically come in there, but they don't. Just like the hoses, the brake hoses. The hose that goes from here to the back, I haven't put the fitting in yet. The factory hoses will not work, so you have to buy the hoses too. I've already started gravity bleeding, that's why you got this. I don't let the brake fluid run all down. I put a hose on there and I let it gravity bleed out of that tube so it doesn't get these all nasty and wet. And then of course, even when we bleed them, I leave this on there so it doesn't get it all wet. But anyway, I already showed you on these the hose that comes with them. So you would think that they would just, you know, whatever the hose is, the price is included in the kit, but they don't come with them. Can't imagine how many people order these and they don't have the hoses or the parking brake cables. But these are the cables. They're really nice cables too. It actually attaches to the back of the caliper clip, and then it runs, and it has an adjustable end on this side. So that's kind of cool. So we'll get those. And then here's it's basically a 90-degree fitting that goes on the back of the caliper. And then these are the hoses for the back. So one thing that I'm gonna have to do here, these are the brackets for the back. And what they do, there's a left and a right. let me get this on here. This is the hole where the factory bracket was that held on to the factory hose and screwed into the line. Where these are the brackets, and this is for this car. The bracket goes on like that, but look, the hole doesn't line up. It just don't line up. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just gonna cut this hole. I'm gonna just cut it all the way up, and that way it'll, you know, that's all I can do. I mean, the hole's only coming down to about halfway. I could just drill another hole, but I'm just gonna get my cutter, my die grinder right there, and I'm just gonna cut this all the way up, and it'll be just fine. And then you have to pop these in just like on the front. These are the fittings. And they go on there like that. And then you got to put this clip on. I'm not going to do it until after I get these cut. And then once I get that cut, make sure I can bolt it on, I'll go ahead and put these on. And then we'll get the hoses on. So, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that and get back to it. Well, we about got this one wrapped up. Let me shine a light in here a little bit. So on this side, I did a little trial and fitting a couple different ways by putting the wheel on. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't get any rubbing on the tire or the wheel with this parking brake cable. The original cable actually came through this hole right here, but it was on the bottom. Well, it kind of came up at an angle. Actually, it was on the top. This one is way up here, and it just goes straight back. And if I was to put it coming through this hole, it was going to just be too much of a bind. I don't really like that. And I could have put it on the top and zip tied it, but I just wanted to get it through one of these holes. So I went ahead and ran it through this one and got everything secured underneath, got it all hooked up, and I put the wheel on, and it doesn't really come close at all. Like there's plenty of room here. So I went ahead and went with this one, and got the bracket on. I got the brake hose on. This brake hose has kind of a 45 on one end and a straight on the other. So after just checking a lot of different ways, I decided to go this route. Putting the 90-degree fitting on the back of the caliper straight up, using the straight end on the hose, and then having it 45 out at this angle right here. And as you can see, it's not going to come in contact with the wheel or the tire because it's going to be pretty high up. It's not going to be going up underneath here for the bump stop to hit. So that was pretty much the best way of running that. You can do it all different ways. Yeah, so that's definitely going to be good there. And then as far as the ABS cable, or the sensor cable I should say, the original bracket had a place on the back for this cable to actually attach to, and this one doesn't, of course. So I got it zip tied to the brake line, and then I kind of zip tied it back here, zip tied it right here, and then where the rubber is on the line, I kind of zip tied it right there, and just did little zip ties right there as well, just for a little extra security. And this whole section is just going to go, as this rear end goes up and down, this whole area is going to go up and down together. And then originally the bracket they had back here, this actually connected to the bracket right in here. So the only place that I could put it was right here. I just zip tied it right there, and that way it's not going to move around. Always keep a little bit of slack, and then as this rear end goes up and down, this is just going to follow. It's just going to go up and down with it, so it's not going to come in contact with anything. So I'm happy with that. I'm just gravity bleeding now. I always put some hoses, little clear hoses on there, and these pretty much, they got almost all the air out of them now, so I'm going to shut them off and then go ahead and start gravitying this side. I just finished this side up. This one's all exactly the same way. I went ahead on that side. I went and kind of tried different things, and once I decided which way I was going to run the brake line, like I say, and the parking brake cable, I copied this side to that side. So it was a lot faster on this side. Everything's the same. So on these, even on the front ones, like I said, these fittings are just a pipe thread. You don't put any sealer on them, but you got to make sure you run them in far enough. So I made one full turn, and it was pretty tight going the last 1/4 to 3/4. But I went ahead and I went ahead and cranked it around one more full turn, which was very tight, and I didn't really want to break this off or crack the housing, but it went on around. That way it's not going to leak at all, and it worked out really well. And of course, whenever you go to tighten these hoses, the actual hose will try to turn on you, and then it'll do like a snaky thing here. So you have to grab the hose and twist it in the opposite direction, and once you get this snug, and then as you tighten this on down, the hose is going to follow it, and you just tighten it on down until the hose is straight where you want it. Because I could have continued tightening it and this thing would have kind of curved back or out this way, but I wanted it to be nice and straight, and it won't interfere in anything. So that worked out good. The only thing I have left to do is I just got to lift the car up. Put this light right here. Only thing I got left to do is I got to put the car up, and I got to get under there and adjust the parking brake cables. They're actually adjustable up under the car where they attach to the bracket. Not much adjustment there, but they're pretty close to where they need to be. Just got to adjust them a little bit, make sure they're even, and then tighten the nuts up and check the parking brake, and then finish bleeding this thing out. Okay, I got these parking brake cables adjusted. So this side was able just to, I kept that factory bracket on here, and all I did, I just got a pry bar and I opened this up. I just bent it up a little bit so I can get the old cable out and got the new one in, and then once I got everything in place, I closed it back up. Just basically runs in the same area and then curves right there. Doesn't have another bracket on it. The other side does. So the other side, as you can see, it runs that way, and then there's a bracket right up there. So I had to drop the whole thing down, and I did the same thing. I opened that one up, took it off the old cable, and then put it on this cable and closed it up. And then it runs, these run behind the gas tank, well, I should say in front of the gas tank. See, it runs right along there, comes around the tank, and then it goes to the other bracket on this side. And I did the same thing on this side. And of course it goes through the lower control arm and then up to the caliper. So as far as adjusting This was a little bit of a trick. Let me get my light here. Okay, so at first when I put them on, I left these loose. I had both of them adjusted about even. I put them about in the middle. And once I got the cables completely attached to the caliper, this side was way in the front like this, and this whole arm was twisted. You want them straight, and it was actually like this. So the only way for me to get this straight is I had to adjust this one all the way back and adjust this one all the way forward, and that was able to get this bracket here straight. That way when you pull on the parking brake handle, it's going to pull on both of them straight. Because if you have this, if it's not straight and it's angled one way or the other, it's only going to pull on one parking brake, and then it will eventually pull on the other one once all the slack gets taken out. And as far as adjusting them, I just did it by hand, and then once I got it where I wanted it, started tightening it up. The bottom one wasn't bad to get to. The top one was a little bit of a, a little bit of a challenge. But what I ended up using, instead of a long one, I used a shorty, and I was able to get to this bottom one. I was able to get a good swing out of it with the short one. Even a long one would work, but the top one had to use the shorty, and I had to come from the top like this. And once I would just tighten it up, and then I would turn it the other way, tighten it up, the other way, tighten it up. And I was able to get them nice and tight, no problem. So that's that. So once I get, I got this one, I went ahead and shut that one off over there for the gravity. And then this one here, I opened it up. So it's actually filling up now. Once it fills up, it's going to start coming out of the line. I'll let it come out for a while, for just a little bit. Once it starts coming out, then I'll stop that one and open up this outer one, let it fill it up, come out, and then I'll go back and forth. Once they're full, I can open up both of them, and then they'll start dripping out, and I'll let them drip for a while, and then after that I can just go ahead and bleed them out. It'd be a lot faster, instead of working all the air out of them. I just let them gravity bleed while I'm doing other stuff. Once it's gravity bled out, it doesn't take no time at all, bleed them right out. So we'll go ahead and get this thing bled out and continue on. Okay, well, we've got this thing wrapped up. I want to go ahead and finish this video off with a walk around on the car, so you guys can see what the brakes look like with the wheels and tires on. We've already got this thing running. We've got the tune loaded, got the gauges installed, and she looks sweet. It's going to be nice taking this thing out. Of course, right now we can't. The roads are kind of messy, so he's actually got to come and get it on the flatbed. So he owns a towing company, and he's got rollbacks, so he's going to come and pick this thing up and take it to the house and unload it and put it right in the garage, because the roads are too bad, too nasty. This thing will be filthy by the time he gets back. So it never sees rain or anything, so it's definitely not going to be driven with the roads the way they are right now. So let me go ahead and turn this camera around so we can get a look at this thing. So these are the Shelby wheels that we were talking about, the 20x10s in the back, 20x9s in the front. Let me get a little close up so you can see the 4-piston calipers, big old slotted rotors. Now these are black rotors, but as this thing is driven, once we seat these brakes in, like I say, we can't do it now, but once we get the roads cleared out, it's going to seat these brakes in and you'll be able to see the rotor. The only area that's not going to be seen is obviously the black on the hat part and anywhere the pad does not ride. So they're going to look sweet. Let me back up here a little bit. It really looks good, man, in person. It's just, I'm kind of curious to see what it looks like on video once I get this video edited here. But the wheels, they just, I don't know, they just make this color. You know, this is that green color that the Bullitt Mustang has. And it just makes it look nice. Let me pop the hood too. It really blends in well with the engine, you know, with the supercharger having the satin finish, the silver and everything. And then also he did a good job picking these wheels out too, because they kind of match the dash. You know, they've got the polished lip, they've got the silver in the center, you know, and it kind of carries on in with the dash. This is kind of a carbon fiber stainless steel, I guess you could see. See, there's the gauges. Let me pop the hood here. Get a good look at this thing with the hood popped, because when it's sitting there at a little car meet, car show, cruising, all that, it's got to have the hood up. You know, so it's gonna look really nice. You got the silver Bullitt brace, strut tower brace, you know, and the satin. He thought about going with the polished, but just figured it would be nicer just to have a clean satin finish, silver, you know, that would kind of match the wheels. So stand back, maybe we can get a little peek of it here with the wheels, the brakes, and the engine. Yeah, so I kind of like that. Okay, well, I think that's going to call it quits here. I think we are done with this one for now. So I do appreciate you guys checking this video out. You know, follow me on this whole build. This was well, what we do, we had a part 1 and 2, which was doing the clutch. We had a part 3, 4, and 5, which was doing the supercharger. If you guys haven't checked that out, check them out. So you'll have 5 separate videos before this one. This would be the final part 6 is what this one will be. And that's it. I do appreciate you guys checking this out. Please like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell so you can get the other videos that come out. Appreciate it. You guys have a good day, and we'll see you on the next video.